We are live from River Valley Room. Well, good morning, everyone. I will now call the January 22nd, 2024 Utility Committee meeting to order by first acknowledging that this place where we are gathered today is the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory. We thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, including the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. This has long been a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share Edmonton as a home. Together we call upon all of our collective honor traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and for future generations. I will start with a roll call of committee members. Councillor Paquette.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Jans.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Salvador.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Stevenson.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Tang.
Good morning.
Good morning, and we're joined by several of our colleagues today. Councillor Rutherford.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Rice.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Wright. We'll presume she'll be along. And Councillor Principe.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think Councillor Wright's with us, but there seems to be a gap in the audio connection there. So I will take a motion to adopt today's agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Please vote.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes. Please display the vote. That is carried. I would take a motion for approval of the minutes of the November 3rd Utility Committee meeting.
I'll approve move the approval of minutes from the November 3rd, 2023 Utility Committee meeting.
Great, thank you. Please vote. We have all the votes. Please display the vote. That is carried. Protocol items. I am not aware of any. Don't see anything from my colleagues as well. Selection of items for debate. See anybody clicking in?
Sorry, Councillor Carmel, I'm not able to. Oh, there we go.
Here. Oh,
It's open now.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. I just wanted to select 7-2, please.
Okay. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, I see we have a speaker for 7-1, so I'll select 7-1.
Thank you. Councillor Jans.
7-3, please.
Very good, thank you. That's all of the items on our agenda today. Right, there's no adjustments? No, okay. So we will not be voting on any other item. Requests to speak. Councillor Salvador, can I pose upon you?
I'll move the Utility Committee hear from the following speakers in panels when appropriate. For item 7.1, the single-use item bylaw, Sean Stepchuk from Waste Free Edmonton, remote.
Great, thank you. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Specific time on agenda, we have no such requests. We'll take them in order. Councillor inquiries. Are there any councillor inquiries today? Not aware of any. Excellent. That takes us then to item 7.1, single-use item bylaw, bag fees. I'll invite our administration to come on up. I'm sure there's a presentation, and after the presentation, we'll hear from our speaker.
Hello, Council and guests here today for today's report on the single-use item reduction bylaw bag fees. Joining me today is Dennis Jubenville, the Branch Manager of Waste Services, and Alison Bank, the Senior Integrated Waste Policy Planner with Waste Services as well. This presentation was prepared in response to a motion from Council. This presentation was prepared in response to a motion from Council requesting options and implications of not increasing bag fees for new paper and reusable bags. Under the current bylaw, all businesses holding a retail or food business license are required to charge at least 15 cents for each new paper bag and at least $1 for each new reusable bag. These minimum fees are scheduled to increase to 25 cents and $2 respectively on July 1st of 2024. Administration has prepared 4 options for, that address some of the most common themes we've heard over the past 6 months, or the first 6 months of the single-use item reduction bylaw. I'll now pass it over to Dennis to start the presentation. Next slide.
Thanks, Eddie. So many municipalities have opted to take a phased approach, increasing the fee over time as customers become accustomed to it. This includes our peers in Calgary, Vancouver, Chilliwack, and also in San Francisco. The intent of the fee is to help change behavior in order to reduce single-use items from our community. It's important to remember that customers always have an option to forego a single-use bag and avoid the fee altogether. Next slide. The single-use items reduction bylaw aims to reduce single-use items of all materials, not just plastic. Municipalities that have banned plastic bags without introducing a fee on bags of other materials haven't seen an overall reduction. Rather, they've seen an increase in alternatives like paper because people just substitute plastic for other materials. Bag fees help to prevent the substitution of single-use plastic shopping bags for bags made of other materials. Even though paper bags are recyclable and compostable, those processes consume resources and produce emissions. Paper products that have a waterproof lining or are contaminated with food or grease can't be recycled. We know that many Edmontonians already bring their own bags for shopping and even food takeout, yet others have yet to transition. If we wish to achieve a greater single-use item reduction, then an increased fee on bags is a proven way to further motivate this change. This is a program that is challenging our norms of convenience, and we have heard pushback by some Edmontonians when the initial fee was introduced. This was expected, but it is indicative of Edmontonians actively engaging in change behavior. I'll now pass it over to Alison to continue the discussion.
Thank you, Dennis. So we have the advantage of learning from municipalities who introduced single-use item regulations before us. Municipalities that were among the first to introduce regulations started with lower fees in the neighborhood of about 5 to 10 cents for a paper bag. They were finding that this was not enough to get people's attention and was too low to create a lasting behavior change. Some of them also had smaller scopes initially that excluded food service, but are now seeking to change that, as well as proposing fee increases. Leveraging these earlier experiences, municipalities with newer regulations like us have started to set the fees a little higher and have a bit more comprehensive scopes that include food service, recognizing the impacts that bags used in restaurants, and particularly fast food restaurants, have on the environment. These types of regulations are no longer new or novel in Canada, and more municipalities across North America have begun to adopt very similar policies. Based on collective experience across municipalities, we know that it is both common and expected to see some initial reaction to these types of regulations, which often drop off within a few months. And this is what we're seeing here in Edmonton too, which can be viewed on page 7 and 8 of our attachment 1 to this report. The number of complaints we've received is actually quite low when you consider this is a city of 1 million people. Next slide, please. So this report outlines 4 possible options for bag fees, which I will speak to in a bit more detail in the following slides. These options are laid out in order of complexity, starting with number 1, representing our current program without change, down to number 4, which deviates the most from our current program. And regardless of which route is taken, the fee will remain an optional fee. Customers can always choose to avoid the fee by refusing a new bag or bringing their own. The program has a planned waste characterization study next year in 2025 to align with our first goal of a 10% reduction of SUI per capita by year 2 of implementation. The first option is to proceed with the fee increase as planned to 25 cents for paper and $2 for reusable on July 1st this year per our current bylaw. The second option is to delay the fee increase by 1 year to July 1st, 2025 to give customers more time to adapt before increasing the fee. The third option is to not increase the fee and keep fees indefinitely at the current rate of 15 cents for a paper bag and $1 for a new reusable bag. The fourth option is to hold the fee for paper bags in the food service at the current rate of 15 cents, but move forward with an increase for bags in retail settings. In the next few slides, we'll discuss each option in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. Thanks. This option, as mentioned in the previous slide, represents our current program plan. If we proceed with the fee increase per the approved bylaw, it will be consistent with fees that have been found to be effective in other municipalities in Canada, including Vancouver, Victoria, Surrey, and Banff. Bag fee consistency across municipalities was identified during the development of the SUI plan as important by both businesses and residents to promote behavior change, reducing frustration and assisting staff. While it is still too early to have the results of the waste characterization studies, our survey data has indicated that a higher fee may help customers overcome apathy and bring their own bags. Even though there are Edmontonians who may not fully understand the benefits of this fee, it appears as though they are also reducing their bags already and will continue to do so following the fee increase. Option 2 represents keeping the same program in place with a commitment to increase the bag fee, but delays the increase by a year to 2025. This would allow administration additional time to review the impact of current bag fees through waste characterization studies planned next year in 2025. Based on our survey results, the current bag fees may already be contributing to waste reduction, and higher fees may lead to further waste reduction. While delaying the increase may slow the pace and reduce complaints, behavior change may also ultimately be slower, and the city may not meet the waste reduction targets outlined in the SUI plan. This option would require the bylaw to be rewritten, which is a process that would require a public hearing and a petition period, and this process is expected to take at least 4 months. Option 3 would eliminate the fee increase and keep bag fees status quo. This option does not align with many other municipalities. Fees of 25 cents for paper bags and $2 for reusable bags are considered leading practice in Canadian municipalities, motivating customers to bring their own bags while still remaining affordable for those customers who do need them. At this point, we don't have waste characterization studies available to help determine if this fee is effective. Once we do have this data, if our waste reduction goals aren't being met, administration may ultimately recommend increasing the fee to further incentivize behavior change. This option also requires the bylaw to be rewritten, which again would take at least 4 months. So option 4 is the most complex option and takes us furthest away from our current program. Based on our jurisdictional scan, it is unprecedented and deviates significantly from leading practices. There are no municipalities, to our knowledge, differentiating fees for food service in this way. While the number of inquiries we received has decreased since July, the main topic of discussion has been bags, with specific emphasis on how bag fees have been implemented at food service such as drive-through. This option was developed to address those concerns by not increasing the paper bag fee for food service. As the fees would increase as planned in retail scenarios, it is assumed that waste reduction would also continue to increase to some degree. This option would appeal to a small but vocal portion of the community. This would be a complicated option to pursue, as the current bylaw is written based on business license type, while this option would structure bag fees based on a business activity, selling food versus selling other goods. For example, a food service business with a retail component, like selling gift cards or t-shirts, would be required to differentiate between food service and the retail purchases and apply a bag fee accordingly. Because it is unprecedented, more legal analysis would be required and more extensive communication and education to be required once the bylaw is passed. It's unlikely that this process would be completed within the 16 weeks or 4 months quoted for the other options. If an amended bylaw is not approved by July 1st, the bag fee increase would take effect per the current bylaw. This option again is very complex and makes an already nuanced bylaw very difficult to implement and enforce, and would be challenging and confusing for some business owners and patrons alike. As is true with options 2 and 3, if waste reduction goals aren't met, administration may ultimately recommend a bag fee increase in the future. So for reference, as noted in our attachment 1, bag fee inquiries and complaints have remained low, so changing the program such as an option 4 would be considered a very bespoke option. We have heard fewer inquiries on bag fees since the summer, implying that Edmontonians are already starting to adapt. If bag fees do increase at a future date, we would expect to see a similar increase in inquiries, and we'll be prepared to answer any questions. I'll now pass it back to Dennis to conclude today's presentation.
Thanks, Allison. If the option is chosen to proceed with a bag fee increase as currently written in the bylaw, there's no implication to the timeline. Option 2 through 4 require a charter bylaw amendment. If the bylaw is not amended before July 1st, the bag fee increase will take effect as drafted. The charter bylaw amendment process requires advertisement for 2 consecutive weeks, a 60-day petition period, a public hearing before second and third reading. This process takes at least 16 weeks or 4 months. This timeline at the bottom reflects the complexity of option 4 and the time needed to analyze a significantly more complex amendment. If Council votes to pursue a bylaw amendment that differentiates paper bag fees or food-related activities, direction from Council will be needed to support legal services as they research how this amendment could be implemented. 2 amendments would be needed. 1 amendment to remove the bag fee increase July 1st or stop it from happening, and a second amendment to implement the differentiated bag fee once a path forward has been identified by administration. Next slide. The goal of the single-use items bylaw is to reduce waste, which is much more environmentally friendly than diverting it through recycling and composting. Fees on new paper and new reusable bags are a proven method to help encourage customers to bring their own bags. These fees challenge the norm and create discomfort, but it is this discomfort that helps motivate our behavior change. As noted, this bylaw does not ban single-use bags, nor does it make fees mandatory. This fee can always be avoided by bringing a reusable bag or by choosing to forego a bag completely. In the coming months, our outreach team will continue to focus on supporting our businesses and Edmontonians as they adapt to a reduced single-use item environment. Next slide. Thank you for your time. We can now answer any questions.
Great, thank you. We'll now hear from our speaker. You can stay, I think, Mr. Robart. Our speaker is remote, so, yep, but your choice, whatever you like. I'll just confirm that Mr. Stepchuk is with us. Has Sean Stepchuk joined the meeting?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go. Yep. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Stepchuk. So just a review of the rules. You'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and after which there may be some questions of you from first committee members and then council members. And so I encourage you to stay after your presentation. And there should be a timer on one of the screens in front of you, so just ask you to watch your time and govern yourself accordingly. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Sean Stepchuk. I'm a co-founder and director of Waste Free Edmonton. Now, we're a grassroots organization that was founded in 2018 that works to significantly reduce the amount of waste produced in Edmonton, and our work is 100% fueled by passionate volunteers. I want to start by thanking the City of Edmonton and this Utility Committee for developing and implementing this bylaw. For too long, the focus in the city had been on just finding ways to divert waste from landfills rather than focusing on creating less waste in the first place. This bylaw is a significant step in the right direction, and in creating this, the city took a leadership role and put something into place that council and administration should all be proud of. Well, I've presented before this committee and city council in the past a number of times on the many harms of single-use items. I won't go through this the same discussion today, as I'm confident that you're well aware of these issues, hence the creation of this bylaw in the first place. However, just to provide a quick reminder that single-use plastic and other plastics can be harmful for wildlife, harmful for humans, with microplastics being found throughout the human body. Single-use items take resources to manufacture, to transport, every step of the way, including the use of fossil fuels, resulting in increased greenhouse gas emissions. And single-use items cause extra strain on the waste management system, which the city ultimately has to pay for. Now, regarding the report prepared for your consideration today, Waste Free Edmonton fully supports the current plan with respect to bags, option 1, and that is to increase the fees on paper bags and reusable bags in 2024 as planned and as is currently in the bylaw. Now, I just want to take a bit of my time to discuss these two specific items, the paper bags and the reusable bags. First, it has to be recognized that the larger fees are meant to incentivize the use of reusable bags or just avoiding bags altogether. This is, of course, logical. It's been shown by what other jurisdictions have done. And I'll also point to the city survey question 6, within which says 51.3 of those who answered the survey said they're definitely likely to bring their own bag or avoid a bag altogether when the fees are higher. Now, why is this important? We've talked a lot in the past about single-use plastics, but paper, while better in many ways, has its own issues as well. There are many resources that are used for the creation of paper bags. That includes a huge amount of water, trees, of course, and a huge amount of energy, which again means more greenhouse gas emissions. As well, the creation of these products involves the emission of fine particles and chemicals during the paper bag production. There's emissions and other harms associated with the transportation. So at every stage along the way, there's more greenhouse gas emissions. Now, best case scenario, these are clean at the end of their life and they're recycled. But even this takes a lot of energy. As well, whether they end up as litter, in the recycling bin, in the black or the green bin, the city waste management system is left to deal with them, meaning, of course, that the taxpayers deal with them. This is a huge waste of city resources and taxpayer dollars for something that can be largely avoided. Now, as for reusable bags, the trick to reusables is that they're only better if they're actually reused. Yes, they may be less likely to end up as litter than a single-use plastic bag, but they require a lot more energy and a lot more material, a lot more plastic, again, meaning more greenhouse gas emissions. Now, importantly, with reusable bags, I think I can safely say that pretty much everybody has access to a reusable bag, a backpack, a bag they got from a convention, one that they've bought in the past. I can say that when I go grocery shopping, I still use the cloth bag that in bright sequin says bride to be that my wife got at her stagette 15 years ago. These things are meant to be reused and can be reused for years and years. Now, a $2 fee will further incentivize people to get into the habit of actually bringing their bags. And when they do forget at that odd time, it'll cause them to think twice before they buy another cheap reusable bag when they already have a stack of them back home. So I would encourage this committee to maintain the current plan and raise the fees for reusable bags and paper bags in 2024 and continue to be leaders in this area. So thanks again for your consideration on this issue.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Are there any questions for our speaker? Just allow any councillors to sign up and allow for any technological delays. Councillor Jens?
Thank you. Just very quickly, I'm wondering how the speaker responds to some of what I would call the red herring arguments, like Taylor Swift's private jet emits, more just to see her boyfriend than, a million reusable bags. Or what about China?
Yeah, people can get out of doing anything and taking personal responsibility for any of their actions. Cities can do the same thing. Businesses can do the same thing just by pointing at someone who's doing something worse. But if everybody always did that, then I would argue that in pretty much every aspect, this world would be a much worse place, certainly environmentally. Yes, there's a huge impacts of all of those things, but looking just at what the city can do and what our responsibilities are, and looking at the numbers of single-use items that the city administration has put in previous reports, this is a big problem, and it's quite frankly also a low-hanging fruit. This is something where the amount of harm is completely disproportionate to the amount of utility. That is, what people are getting is a small amount of convenience, very small, but the harms are much greater. We're not talking about taking plastic out of a medical setting or out of cars or things where the utility is a lot greater. This is an area where it's really very disproportionate.
Okay. Yeah, the one area we just really had the most feedback was around drive-throughs, and but then we also note the precipitous drop in complaints after July once people kind of got used to the new normal. I was wondering if you had any insight into that.
Yeah, there's always a learning curve whenever there's any sort of changes. And I think with that, it took some, not necessarily by surprise, but it took some people by surprise and some businesses that they weren't ready yet. They didn't know how to communicate. Their staff weren't trained. They didn't have any systems in place to ask people, do you want a bag or do you want to bring your own? So it makes sense that there would have been a period where there would have been complaints. Especially, I mean, a lot of people were getting the same thing they'd been getting in drive-through for years, and now all of a sudden they were just getting charged more for it without even being asked and told why. So I think that that was expected, and then I think the drop-off in complaints is also expected, as it's just now people are used to it, and they've adjusted accordingly, and businesses have adjusted accordingly.
Yeah, I think the to stay mugs and the frosty mugs and the other options that are available are really exciting. So thank you very much for sharing your insights. Mr. Chair, I support option 1 and the status quo option, and happy to yield my time.
Great, thank you. Just let me know, Councillor Jans, if you want to actually move that formally. Councillor Tang?
Great, thank you so much, Sean, for speaking. And right now, the city has been very active with public communication, working with businesses, residents, and other organizations. I'm wondering if your group is taking part in any of these awareness raising activities. Are you planning on your own kind of grassroots actions for awareness raising, just to kind of help with that?
Yeah, through things like social media and through our newsletters and through various some in person, we certainly try to educate. We don't have obviously the same reach that the city of Edmonton has, but one of the things that we really try for is some of the best practices and sharing best practices. But I think the city's been doing a very good job of doing that themselves. And it's nice to see, for example, a lot of smaller businesses that you'll go into my vet clinic, who you wouldn't even think that they have very many bags. I'm not sure what they would be giving bags out for, but they have up on their screen, they have the City of Edmonton produced graphic talking about the bag increase and the reasons for it, and what the price is. And so I think the city's been doing a good job with respect to that, and certainly being supplemented by activities such as ours.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. And obviously, I hear you loud and clear. You support number 1. And I think I can't anticipate what you might say, but, maybe if you can articulate a little bit about any kind of unintended consequences you might see with the other options.
Well, the option 2, to just delay a year, I see absolutely no really none of the other options do I see any rationale behind, any strong rationale. This is something where people have been expecting it already for a year, or more actually, in some cases. Businesses have already, I know some businesses have already upped to the 25 cents. And this provides some level of consistency, right? This makes it so that everybody is doing it. And when you do what's already kind of been expected, what people have been putting their plans into place for, and not really changing much, just further adding to the incentive, I think that just makes full sense. As was pointed out by administration, the fourth option, I think, would just create confusion. I think that taking a step in that direction is a big step backwards in terms of the level of confusion. And like has been noted, the complaints have gone down. This is a thing where businesses have now adjusted, and there's really no reason to take a step back.
Do you find, I think it's in attachment 2, just some of the responses from businesses, for example, there's not that many of them who believe that, by increasing, we'll be achieving some of those reduction goals. Were you surprised to kind of see some of those results, and any thinking or any thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak anecdotally that people I talk to, especially in times like this, people are going to, if they forget their bags on a given day, or if they don't want to have to pay $2 for another reusable bag, that's enough to incentivize them. And I think just even looking at, for example, that question 6 that I pointed out, almost 52% of people said that the higher fees, how likely are you to bring your own bag or avoid a bag altogether when fees are higher? And 52% responded definitely likely. And that's in addition to people who responded probably, likely, and possibly. So I think it's clear that this is going to create a further impact and further disincentivize the use of the single-use bags and the reusable bags.
Yeah, I hear you also kind of talk about a lot of the businesses have come on board, and they're seeing positive impact. I just find that there's a bit of a disconnect between that, which I'm hearing as well from many of the businesses in my ward, but also kind of the survey response. Not like the majority of them are not quite as optimistic. And so, I certainly have some questions about that for administration, but I just thought it was kind of curious, and I was wondering if, your group has picked that up. But anyways, thank you for your response.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Mayor Sohi?
Well, thank you so much, Councillor Cartmel, and to our speaker. I have a couple of questions. First is, I recently visited a city where there's a fee for a bag, but the communication was very clear. Like they don't say, do you want a bag or do you need a bag? What they say is, would you like a bag for, say, 25 cents or 15 cents? Is our communication that clear in Edmonton so that people who do know about the existence of the bylaw, they're not getting a bag for free, or then find out later on that they've been charged a fee?
I think that now most people, I mean, this isn't something that's new. Some businesses have been doing this for, I think Shoppers Drug Mart, for example, did a 5-cent fee a decade ago. And they would always say, they were trained, I believe, to say, would you like a bag for 5 cents? And so it's incumbent somewhat on the business to mention the price. But even without that, I think that it's pretty clear to people now. Again, things like the city resources that I've seen posted at a number of, especially small businesses, where they don't bother creating their own. And I think most people understand this now. Again, with the drive-throughs, it was something where, no, that wasn't communicated well to people. But now I think it is, right? Now we're to the point where people know to expect this. The businesses are mostly saying it. They're mostly giving people the options. And so I think now we're at the stage where this is very clear to people in all of these settings.
I see. Okay. And another question that I hear from some constituents is that why do businesses get to keep the fee, and why it's not being used to educate or do other good work, whatever that might be?
Well, there's a few answers to that. First off, I believe that jurisdictionally, if the city were to collect the fee, that would be a tax. And so I don't believe that they can do that. But also, even if that was something that was open to the city to do, these are costs being incurred by the business anyway, right? The bags are something that the paper bag is something that the city or that the business has to bring in and sell. And this is allowing them to recoup it. Now, I know the city can't force them to do anything in particular with that the excess money that goes beyond just recouping their costs. But I know it's also encouraged that they put it into environmental practices and other waste management, waste reduction practices. And that's certainly what we encourage them to do if there is a windfall, as it were, to put it into those areas. They can't be compelled to do it, but certainly with the city incentivizing them, or at least promoting that, and with individuals saying, hey, how about you put this money into changing your practices, getting more efficient, getting solar, getting more efficient light bulbs, whatever the case may be for the particular business. I think that's certainly the way to go.
Thank you so much for joining us. That's all.
Great, thank you. I think that concludes any questions of our speakers. So thank you again, Mr. Stepchuk, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate that. We'll now circle back to administration. I'll first go to Mr. Beckett to see if there's anything that he had to offer by way of comment on this report.
Just one comment on
Point of order, I'm having a bit of audio trouble.
Oh. Do you have your microphone on, or you might have to lean into it a bit, Mr. Beckett? I'm not sure.
It still sounds like the mic's not on. It sounds just like an echo in the room.
Sorry, Mr. Beckett. Might be a supply chain issue.
Now, what was I going to say?
You were going to say something about bag fee.
Right. Yeah. The question about the disposition of the revenue from collecting these bags minus whatever incremental cost is avoided. If you believe in competition, and McDonald's is collecting 5 cents per Big Mac for every bag that they provide, over time, and not immediately, but over time, that's a reduction in their expenses, which should lead to a reduction in overall cost to the consumer. Now, this is not a one-for-one kind of thing, but it is something to take into account when you ask, why do they get to keep the money? They get to keep all the money they collect, but over time, competition drives their costs down to the point where that is taken into account. Other than that, this is a policy decision, not a regulatory decision, so I leave it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. We'll now turn to questions of councillors. So I will start with Councillor Salvador, who exempted this item.
I'm going to have to move that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I actually don't have many questions, but I am happy to move the recommendation that the January 22nd, 2024 City Operations Report, CO 02085, be received for information.
Great, thank you. We have a motion on the floor. I'll go to Councillor Rutherford next. Councillor Rutherford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I, first and foremost, I do have some questions, absolutely, but overall, I just want to thank administration for this very comprehensive report. One of the questions that I have that really stuck out to me is I really appreciated the survey data and the attachment 2. And what I noticed, though, was in one of the responses, and I'm just trying to get down there right now, response to the demographics on page 15 out of 28. What I found was really interesting is that there's only 0.2% that were under 18 and another 1.9% that were 18 to 24 years of age. And I was wondering if administration, if there's any ability to break down that data for any one specific demographic within this bar chart. So for example, if we're saying, like, we know that there's over 50% of people think it's a reasonable step for this bylaw, but I'm wondering what the under 24 says. Is that percentage higher, lower? Just very curious about that.
So Councillor, we can do that. So we are able to differentiate that information by characteristic. However, we haven't done it to date, and so it's work that we'd have to bring back.
Yeah, so I think and I don't know if it's like, would it just be an inquiry then that I could do at another time? Because I'd be curious, again, just thinking from a GBA plus lens, some of these demographics, especially where we had a lower response rate, I always think that there could be some unique information that could be shored up. So I'm even thinking about the income brackets under 60,000 and the younger populations as two examples of something that I would be very interested in what effects or what their thoughts are on this. So are they more likely to use the bag bylaw? Are they less likely? I would just be very curious on those specific demographics. So what would be the best way to go about getting a little bit more information on those demographics and that chart?
So if it would please Council, we could draft a memo and provide that additional information at a later time.
It would be, I mean, I'm not on committee, but that would be something that I definitely would be interested in for sure. So I don't know if anybody else would speak to that, but definitely I think a memo would be great. And then one other question I had is in the introductory executive summary, it talks about inquiries, and I was really surprised at how low the inquiries were. But one of the questions I have is, were those inquiries and complaints together, or were complaints categorized different? So if people phone 311 to say they don't have any questions about the bag fee, they just didn't like it, is that captured in that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That graphic was also in our slide deck, and those responses do include inquiries. So that was businesses asking for clarity on bag fees, or residents asking for clarity on bag fees, as well as complaints all rolled in together through our various channels from 311. The councillor inquiries that we did get that were passed on to administration, as well as our dedicated email for businesses. So all of our channels lumped in together, that was the sum of it.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. And I found this report fascinating from a behavioral theory perspective. I guess, one of the questions that I also have is, if we're seeing that this is the best way to create behavioral change, why are we not applying it across other single-use items? Because I think one of the questions I often get is why just the bags? Why not other things?
So we did start with the bag fees because that was more consistent with other municipalities. We had the ability to learn from municipalities that came before us, such as Vancouver, who did have a fee on the cups that didn't work out as well as intended. And we learned that having things like reusable cups mandated for dine-in was a way better way of achieving a reduction in cups, which is one of our highest large litter items in Edmonton. So we did apply a bit of that learning to our current bylaw, but we still wanted to balance that with accessibility, such as the availability of straws for those who need them. So we moved to a by request for that, which is also consistent with other municipalities for that across the board consistency.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Mayor Sohi?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to come back to my question that I raised to the speaker about clear communication around requiring thereby to, instead of saying you need a bag or want a bag, instead of actually saying, do you want to purchase a bag? Are you, first of all, or like what percentage of Edmontonians are aware about the bylaw? And if they're not, then why wouldn't a precise language actually be raise the awareness?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, we do have a lot of resources available to businesses that helps to communicate that, and I think the survey showed that the majority of Edmontonians at this point are aware of the bylaw, even if they're not used to participating in it in all spheres of life. We do continue to talk with businesses and have had a very recent industry roundtable with a lot of large quick service restaurants with the intent of doing just that, figuring out how to best encourage best practices across the board with them in compliance with our bylaw. And we learned from them that they are still working on their own learning curve with their own staff, that they're continuing to encourage their frontline staff to ask customers right at the beginning, do you want to fork with that? Do you need napkins? Would you like a bag for 15 cents? Or in the case of a reusable, $1.
Got it.
But that's still a learning curve for them as well. So they're definitely still working on it, and we expect to see more consistency come as their education programs progress.
Got it. On the who gets to keep the fee, I think Mr. Beckett's answer answer my question on that. I think hopefully it will reflect it in through that computation in the prices. How have we seen how much reduction we have actually seen? I know it's too early. It's only less than a year. Like what? Are we seeing the behavioral change? Are we seeing the reduction in single-use items?
Yeah, I think at this point, as you mentioned, we don't have the waste characterization studies to show the after data. So we did a baseline study before the bylaw was implemented, and so we will be doing our waste characterization study next year to align with our year 2 milestone, and then we'll have a little bit more detailed information about the prevalence of the items that folks are taking home or putting in our public space containers. But I think we do know anecdotally, at least from our survey, that folks are seeing a reduction of at least 10% across the board in many things. So businesses reported that their customers were reducing, and the residents did report that they've already engaged in reduction behavior. So we believe there is reduction going on, and that's encouraging, but we'll have obviously more detailed data next year when we do our characterization study.
Got it. And have we noticed visible reduction in litter?
Again, anecdotally, I think we have, but one of the measures we will be doing over the next year alongside our waste characterization studies will be to continue to work with our capital city cleanup folks that do a lot of the litter cleanup to see what their results are, as well as working with our areas in the city that do litter cleanup, such as parks and roads, to see if they've noticed a reduction as well.
Got it. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your work. I know there has been pushback, but it was expected in these kind of behavioral changes. No, thank you so much for the work you do.
Great, thank you, Councillor Tang.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess just to maybe follow up on that last thread of questions in terms of the waste characterization. I see it come up in option 2, but you are planning on doing that regardless of which, if it's option 1 that's put forward, it will still do that next year, right?
Yeah, so the waste characterization study was planned for year 2 for all of SUI, not just the bags. So regardless of what bag option that's chosen here today, we will still continue with our planned waste characterization study to see what changes in other materials besides bags we are noticing in Edmonton. So definitely still planning it for year 2.
I hear you say that anecdotally you're hearing that yes, there has been some reduction, but if I look at the Q5 in the survey to the businesses, the vast majority are saying that kind of across the board, regardless if it's bags or cups or accessories, it's stay the same or use more, as reported by the businesses. And yeah, I guess I just found, what I'm reading and what I'm hearing from you, there just feels like there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of how much the businesses are buying on, or buying into this, and what they're reporting.
Yeah, so again, anecdotally, based on the businesses that did answer the survey, which was a fairly small proportion compared to the total of Edmonton, we did hear that one of the reasons why they're responding that way is because some customers they're finding are still quite apathetic to the fees. So as we've heard in other municipalities, there are people who are willing to pay and absorb the fee just for the convenience. And so they're still using the bags at the fee that we're at.
Yeah, and I imagine, their staff, they don't want their staff to be constantly harassed either. I guess, how are you addressing, businesses, for example, that are sharing false information, maybe not with poor intention, just based on their own misinterpretation of the bylaw? For example, I've seen charging cups used in fast food, and this is for sit down, or those who are giving out, like the ones that you just referenced, who are giving out those paper bags without a fee because they don't want to be, get into the conflict with customers. And I see Mr. Scott is also online. I'm curious, how, there been beyond education? Has there been any enforcement done?
Yeah, so we do have an education first approach, as we've discussed in prior meetings. So we have had our education team being out on the streets, meeting businesses to help reinforce those messages. And we do try to follow up fairly regularly with a lot of the large quick service restaurants and keep those channels open to help reinforce the right messaging to clarify any issues. If we do get questions, of course, we answer them. If we do get a complaint from a resident, we also are able to kind of go out and do that reactive education as well. At this point, if their education has been done and we're still seeing issues or clarity issues, we are working with our enforcement team, our bylaw enforcement team, to go out and write them warning letters, notices to comply. We haven't had to do that yet because everybody's still very much in a learning curve, but there is definitely an enforcement approach that goes with the education.
Okay, thank you. And then would you consider doing this survey again in another 6 months, even though, the waste characterization is scheduled for 2025? I'll be very curious if any of these answers change in another 6 months.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can consider as part of our fact finding as we go through this.
Yeah, and do you know what our regional municipalities are planning on? Any conversations there?
At this point, nothing really in depth. We do know that St. Albert, for example, has been in consultation about what a single-use item bylaw might look like for them, but at this point, they haven't implemented anything. Wetaskiwin and Spruce Grove actually were ahead of us a little bit. Wetaskiwin has 15 cents for a paper checkout bag that did start in 2019, so they were a little ahead of Edmonton. And Spruce Grove has a non-mandatory fee, but has also been doing fees since January 2022 at 15 cents for a paper bag and $1 for reusable. So we do know there is discussion going on. Edmonton obviously is a large municipality for the region and is seen as a bit of a leader, and so we do continue those conversations with our surrounding municipalities to support them.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. This is a great report. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. I understand that Councillor Rutherford is just to speak. Are there anybody else that wants to speak to the motion on the floor? I'll go to Councillor Rutherford first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to thank Utility Committee for indulging me. This report was generated from a motion that I did, not necessarily wanting to change course, but what I felt that was missing was the ability for me to articulate to Edmontonians writ large, but also the Edmontonians that I represent in Ward and Olnick, about the correlation between this bag fee and environmental change and impacts. And this report exceeded those expectations. I feel it did a really great job of giving me the language that I need to be very clear about the intent and the purpose, while also bringing in some of the survey results that I found very insightful. Over 50% of Edmontonians feel that this is a reasonable bylaw move. I think that's really, really stands out. Looking at how many people are more likely to reduce further with an increased fee was a very insightful question as well from that survey. In addition, I think some of the citations and the research, as well as the more comprehensive and updated jurisdictional scan, because even I know some municipalities from the time we approved to now have changed. So I just really want to say that I greatly appreciate this report. I do have a subsequent just to make sure that we get the memo, because I would, as we're making decisions and it's important, I think, for myself, but also this council as a whole to consider GBA plus. I do think that a little bit further information on those specific demographics would go a long way. So there is a subsequent, I think, in the works for that, just to make sure it's clear what we're looking for. But thank you again to administration for your work on this. Very great insights.
Great, thank you. Anyone else to speak? Councillor Salvador to close? No. Please vote on receipt of information.
Yes.
We're just getting the vote voted, and we'll mark you as yes, Mayor Soe. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. I will, on behalf of Councillor Rutherford, move the subsequent motion respecting a memo. If the clerk could put that up, please. So I will move that administration provide a memo outlining.
We're just getting it loaded. Bear with us.
Outlining the following information related to the January 22, 2024 Operation Report CO02085, a further breakdown of data from the population under 24, and a further breakdown of the data from the population with income below $60,000. I have no introductory comments. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion or questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Just waiting on one vote. Okay, we have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that too is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your presentations today. Enjoy the rest of your week. On from here. Takes us to item 7.2, EPCOR Water Services 2024 Operational Plan. So we'll invite our friends from EPCOR to come on up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you ready?
We are ready.
All right, away you go. Thanks for being here today.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Sakib Chaudhary. I'm joined with some of my colleagues from EPCOR, and the purpose of being here this morning is to present the EPCOR Water Services 2024 Operational Plan. We appreciate the opportunity to present this to Utility Committee. As I mentioned, the purpose of my presentation is to provide a brief overview of the plan and highlight a few of the key initiatives identified in the 2024 operational plan. This is the first operational plan that EPCOR Water Services is presenting following the integration of the water and drainage business units in 2023. Next slide, please. On the slide here, you'll see EPCOR's vision, or EPCOR Water Services vision. EPCOR Water Services vision is to be an industry leader in providing safe and reliable water and wastewater services, recognized as an environmental steward and trusted by our customers and stakeholders. This vision statement is the basis for the development of our annual operational plan. As reflected in our operational plan, we achieve this vision through effectively planning business requirements, focusing on excellence in engineering and capital project delivery, and pursuing proactive operational practices informed by a rigorous stakeholder engagement process. And we achieve this through a strong commitment to health and safety, the environment, people, and our customers. Next slide, please. We developed our 2024 operational plan, which is included in Appendix 1 in the report that was submitted, through the identification of specific objectives and initiatives by focus area for EPCOR Water Services. I'll briefly summarize these focus areas. So first is health and safety. Objectives and initiatives in this area focus on ensuring the health and safety of EPCOR employees, contractors, and the public. Public health and the environment. This focus area reflects EPCOR's commitment to exceed environmental and public health standards. People and culture. These focus areas ensure there is a continued emphasis on employee and leadership development, employee wellness, and fostering an environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Operational excellence. Objectives and initiatives in the operational excellence area focus on improving operational performance and cost reduction through process improvement, innovation, and systems thinking. Customer and stakeholder. This focus area ensures that our objectives and initiatives are in alignment and prioritize the expectations and needs of our customers and stakeholders. And finally, shareholder value. This focus area reflects the need to meet financial targets while continuing to meet all performance expectations and targets, including our PBR metrics. By using this approach, we're able to develop an operational plan that supports our vision, balances priorities across these areas, and allows us to clearly communicate our goals and priorities to both EPCOR Water Services employees as well as key stakeholders. Next slide, please. In addition to the focus areas, in our operational plan, we have also identified key initiatives for EPCOR Water Services in 2024. In the next few slides, I will briefly highlight some of the key initiatives. First, water drainage integration. Following the integration of the water and drainage business units into a single business unit in 2023, we continue to focus on realizing the benefits of bringing together our water utilities. This includes continuing to pursue and implement a one water approach to managing operations across the entire water cycle. A one water approach means taking a planning and implementation approach to manage finite water resources for long-term resilience and reliability in order to meet both community and ecosystem needs. In addition, we are undertaking a review of various business processes across the integrated business unit to drive consistency across the entire water cycle. These initiatives support our objectives to realize operating and capital efficiencies right from the initial planning stages right through to the execution stage. Next is flood resiliency, and this is another key initiative we've included in our operational plans. In 2024, we will continue our work to advance our flood resiliency plans to protect the water supply for Edmonton and the more than 90 surrounding communities in the event of a major flood, while also partnering with local communities on flood resilience. Protecting water treatment plants from extreme river flooding is an investment in climate resilience, and our work in 2024 will include construction activities at the Rossdale Water Treatment Plant, and we will continue to engage with stakeholders throughout the process. In addition to flood protection work at Rossdale as well as E.L. Smith, planning for flood protection has also commenced for other EPCOR assets within the River Valley, for which EPCOR was awarded funding from the Federal Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund in 2023. Next slide, please. Technology adoption is another key theme in our operational plan in 2024. We continue to make progress on our advanced metering infrastructure project, and the focus in 2024 is the continued installation of AMI devices across the city. The installation phase will focus on the physical installation of the AMI devices, verification of device functionality for all installations, and verification of integration with EPCOR's billing systems. To date, we have installed 8,500 devices, and this work will continue into 2025. As part of the AMI project, work is also set to commence in 2024 on the development of automated software tools to identify and notify customers of higher than normal consumption. Given the complexity and the size of the AMI installation, it is expected that this additional functionality will be available for customer use in late 2025 or early 2026. This additional functionality will allow customers the opportunity to potentially identify and address high water consumption on a timelier basis. Also following the theme of technology adoption, work is commenced in 2024 to develop a roadmap for increased visibility and insight for the water distribution, wastewater collection, and stormwater management system. The development of this situational awareness roadmap will provide a pathway to update mature treatment and transmission systems by adding sensors, increasing the monitoring and control of water distribution, sewage collection, and stormwater collection and management facilities. Through the use of asset and facility visualization, application of artificial intelligence, and improved access to data across the full water cycle, we plan to improve the operation of our facilities and reduce impacts to customers during abnormal events such as main breaks or sewer main blockages. This initiative will also support EPCOR's long-term greenhouse gas emissions targets by reducing energy consumption through the optimization of chemical usage, reduction in water losses, and enhancements to pumping operations. Also reflected in our operational plan are objectives and priorities related to public health and the environment. These include activities related to watershed management and protection. More specifically, this entails the implementation of an integrated watershed management strategy to align water and land planning initiatives to better manage the cumulative environmental impact on the North Saskatchewan River. Also in our plan for 2024 is to develop and implement a greenhouse gases mitigation plan. As part of this work, EPCOR Water Services will identify feasible GHG reduction projects that support EPCOR's goal of achieving 85% reduction in Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHGs by 2035. Next slide. In the area of customers and stakeholders, we'll continue to focus on improving the customer experience through investments in technology to improve service delivery. This includes the previously mentioned advanced metering infrastructure project and the development of the situational awareness roadmap. An integrated view of our data and systems will support a proactive approach for interactions with our customers and stakeholders. We'll also continue to support the city plan and the development community through the completion of our standards modernization work. Updates to these standards will help support the goals of the city plan, including increasing economic development, non-residential growth, and residential density through infill developments. And the final initiative I'd like to highlight is the forthcoming PBR applications for the renewal of the drainage bylaw. As previously communicated to Utility Committee, we are planning to file PBR applications for wastewater collection and wastewater treatment on May 31, 2024, as the currently approved PBR plans are set to expire March 31, 2025. A May 31, 2024 filing will facilitate the approval of a new PBR plan before the end of the year, with new rates to take effect April 2025. We are currently in the process of developing our applications, and stakeholder consultation is underway. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll go first of all to Mr. Beckett. Any comments on this report, sir?
Just one. I noticed that the AMI project includes a proposal to create a tariff for customers who decline the AMI installation. And I just wanted to get EPCOR's perspective on how that proposed tariff will move through the approval process.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Beckett, I believe the fee is already been approved and in place. So there's an approximately $40 fee for the monthly reading charge for a manual read. as well as there's a one-time fee for the installation of a non-AMI meter.
Thank you. That saved me the trouble of reading the tariff.
Very good. That's all, Mr. Beckett. Yeah, thank you. We'll now go to questions from councillors, and I think the list on the screen is an old list. So I'll start with Councillor Stevenson, who exempted this item. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. This report was just very exciting to read, so much positive news. Want to start, it's not in the report, but just wanted to say a change in operations that I've noticed recently that's been really appreciated is just some of the additional signage that's provided when there's EPCOR works underway. With a clear phone number for people to call. It's been very helpful, and I know really appreciated in the community. I have a number of questions that are bouncing around a little bit, but just want to start with the standards modernization. So very excited to see this work progressing. Really pleased to see the reduction in requirements. Just wondering if you could speak briefly to, the continued requirement for 220 liters per second 220, I don't know what the unit is, versus the 176 average in residential use. So it seems like our minimum requirements are still higher than what we're seeing as an average use.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Susan Ansel, Director, One Water Planning. It came through the consultation that we did with the community and the city and the development community as to what to drop that number. Should we drop it all the way down to the 160 liters per person per day, so the C is capita? And the recommendation was to leave it at the 220. Primarily because it's greenfield, and so there are sometimes changes in the development plan of you're going to more population, and so that capita has an assumption of so many people per house. The way the standard modernization ended up rolling out, we're giving the developers two options. There is the one number, which is the more conservative number, but if they want to go with a more fine-tuned number, we can actually work with them and come up with a specific design standard for the type of development they're planning to build. And we actually are seeing that in the Riverview Edgemont area, where they have worked with us, and I think they're using about a 170 liters per capita per day for that development.
Okay, very interesting. And just on that, in terms of the second prong, I may have made a misassumption about this, but it seemed that second prong may more typically be used in infill development scenarios. And just wondering if that creates some challenges in terms of just a slower process for infill.
It actually was the reverse feedback that we got. A lot of the infill developers wanted the faster process where they could just pick that single number. Where we're finding they'll want a more custom reviews potentially on the fire flow standard as opposed to the per capita number, versus in the greenfield, the per capita numbers are the ones that they tend to want to look at a different approach. And so,
well, and I guess, oh yeah, and sorry, and so that would be my understanding too, that infill developers would just want a single number that they can choose from. But I guess my concern is if that 220 is still sort of frequently not available in some of our mature neighborhoods.
So the liters per capita per day tends not to be a design driver in the infill location, because the fire flow is what tends to drive the pipe sizing requirements.
Right, and so apologies that I'm blurring those two. So with the fire flow requirement,
and so those numbers did drop in terms of what's required for the majority of the commercial properties. Previously would have required 300 liters per second, are now at 180 liters per second in the new standards. And again, we've been improving our process and approach to optimize the time it takes to review to do the exact for a building you're planning.
Okay, well maybe I'll just reframe my question a little bit as well. So will the reduced fire flow requirements help remove the need for infill projects to go through the sort of like case-by-case evaluation that's currently happening?
We are working with the fire department to improve that process. I don't think we will remove it, but we are definitely streamlining it.
Okay, so that's a positive step, and I don't want to undermine that. Um, and so that work will be ongoing and iterative in terms of continual streamlining, and then again potentially maybe getting to a set number that helps avoid the one project by project basis, or is that direction we need to give to our fire department?
It's a question that needs to be directed to the fire department, so we work in support. What we are improving is the level of the water system capacity information, and the fire department is looking at developing a specific portal that they will work, because they have the ultimate decision on what is required for a property.
Great. I'll come back for a few more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Tang.
Great. Thank you very much for this overview and report. Maybe I'll just continue on under standards modernization. So for my understanding, then approach 2 is a much more tailored approach, and the operational plan takes sort of the internal capacity to do that tailored approach into account. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. I think the resources are pretty close to equivalent. It's just we're dealing with it before it becomes an escalation in one aspect, and able to come to a more, it makes the later submissions go much faster by taking a little bit more time at the front end.
Right. And then based on your consultation with industry and various stakeholders, do you anticipate more people might take this route?
We're seeing a balance. It depends on the community and what they're planning. But it is an option for both, and we're committed to make it simple for them. We already do have a process where they contact us to get the available pressures that they're connected to, so it's not a big add-on to an existing process.
Okay, good. Just back to the top of the flood resiliency. I think at one of our community meetings around the Millborn flood mitigation, I recall that, there were some pretty historical rainfall numbers reported this last summer. And I'm wondering, when you track those, I guess the outcomes to measure the success of our flood mitigation initiatives, how is that? Can you just remember how would that be reported? What report would that be as part of the plan?
We don't have it in a specific report right now, although mid-year we do an operations update report, and so we could put some information in there if there's interest from council. Typically, the ops report, what we're presenting here, is a future report, but we do have a progress report that comes mid-year. With the rate filing this year, I'm not sure of the timing.
So maybe,
go ahead.
If I could just clarify what you're asking, Councillor Tang. As Frank Manarino, I'm the SVP of Water Services. I think what you're asking is, we've had some significant rainfall here over the summer, and you're asking how did that impact, or did we measure it, or did we see any impact at the plants?
Yeah, and I think just in general, like, when you report on metrics and that kind of stuff.
So it wasn't a flood risk this year, but we do see the impact, of course, of rain on the river in terms of the intake water quality that requires us to adjust our water treatment processes. But it wasn't anything outside of our normal operations that we couldn't handle with our normal tools at our disposal, et cetera. What we're talking about with flood mitigation, of course, is the highly extraordinary event that we think could happen here at some point. So
kind of regular tracking and metrics is just part of your operational reporting. That doesn't necessarily come to this committee, but it is part of your internal.
Sure. But we can certainly take that away, and in our next operational plan reporting cycle, think about how we could feed back some information to you around the impact of rain and weather and et cetera on our water treatment plant operation.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then just on the AMIs, advanced metering infrastructure, for the ones that have been installed today, just wondering how residents are responding. Are you seeing a lot of people declining?
So far, it's been going quite well. So we're over 5,000 installations, and we haven't had any significant outside of the norm, I would say, refusals. I think our people who wanted to opt out are running under 5%, maybe under 3%. So what we more or less expected. But yeah, it's been going very well so far.
Okay, and I think I have seen a memo around that, and so there are some communication going out about this change, and you'll be able to kind of share what we can
Yeah,
share with the residents, right?
yeah, absolutely. We can definitely, we're keeping a close eye on this, and we'll stay in touch if anything starts to look a little bit problematic. But so far, so good.
And then just so I'm clear, so for example, if there's a slow leak somewhere in your house that's racking up your bill, with this technology, you'll be notified as a homeowner. You'll be notified sooner than later, so it doesn't get into this thousands of dollars situation.
Yeah, that's definitely our hope. That's what Sakib talked about in his presentation, that we're hoping to leverage this technology to advise customers here in the future if they've got something extraordinary happening that ultimately leads to a higher water bill, so that they can be aware of it and respond sooner.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's all from me.
Thank you. Councillor Jantz?
Yeah, I was curious as well about the carrot and stick with the AMI. Like, I think it's kind of been touched on, but just to confirm, it's totally optional. But there'll be was it a $40 or an $80 charge?
Yeah, it's actually $49.03, and at one time $200 installation fee for a non-standard, which would now be a non-AMI meter. And as I said, so far we haven't had a whole lot of uptake on that, but we've had a few.
But as the utility, like in the and like there's a great benefit to everyone being a part of this. I'm wondering if well, maybe it'll just come with time. I guess I'm wondering, I saw, so you're moving around in a clockwise circle, getting to different areas over the next month, or next few years, rather.
That's right. Yeah.
If there's folks ahead of time who are doing a new build who want to opt in early but aren't in that zone, are they able to do so?
Yeah, we believe that's the case, yeah, that they're able to opt in for new builds, that this now becomes a new standard when they contact us for metering infrastructure.
Okay, so proactively, residents who are concerned about the the dripping faucets or anything else could start trying to get ahead of line right now. Is that right?
Yeah, go ahead if you don't.
So, Councillor Jans, I'll answer that one. We have had a few situations where in the existing area we've come across an individual that has multiple properties across the city, and so in that case we've done that. If it's a new build and a new install, or the meter is up for its standard replacement cycle, then it will go in. Opening it up to a sort of an a la carte, I'm interested in moving soon. That would be very difficult with the efficiency of our contractor. We have to, basically get into every home and do that. So it's sort of a secondary thing, not an open call. But if we contact you and you have another property, then we have a potential to coordinate that for the business.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. Changing gears dramatically, I'm interested in the province of Alberta put out a directive about drought management and getting ready for the extreme shortage of precipitation. I note on page 13, you already talk about like the reduced demand in some of the newer homes, et cetera. But how is this broader drought context going to affect our plans here?
So I'll answer that one. Basically, the North Saskatchewan River is a very different watershed than where the directive in southern Alberta is primarily pointed towards. We do always have been looking at the impact of climate change on our watershed, but overall, because of the size of the watershed and the size of the river, we withdraw less than, I think, 5% of the total river volume for our drinking water, and over 95% of that is returned back at our wastewater treatment plants. So we don't see it as an acute issue for us to be worried about in the Edmonton region. We will be supporting the city in the response to the province in terms of wanting to know what our plans are. But generally for us, we do have our demand management measures, which more apply to short-term, 1-week restrictions and trying to minimize lawn watering. But in terms of a longer-term chronic drought risk, that's not the risk for us in Edmonton.
So are we going to see probably like an alternate day watering ban or something like that this summer?
That would depend on individual days, so we don't know that. But historically, where we've seen that we've had to do that is if we've had 10 straight days of no rain, we can get ourselves in that situation, and that happens about once every 5 years.
Okay, I'd be interested in more information on this topic. I can follow up offline. Just as a new
Yep.
counselor, I haven't been through it. But yeah, overall, it looks excellent. So just to confirm back, we do not need to sort of report to a minister. There's no sort of provincial oversight here around our water usage plans, given that drought directive.
No, I think the city has been requested to provide some information, and we are going to work with the city to provide all the information we have, of course, so you can give a response, because the request went from the minister, as far as we understand, to the municipalities. Now, we've got lots of communities around us, so we're looking to coordinate that, because every municipality needs to respond, and we're the supplier, right? So we will obviously work with the city to make sure that that response goes in. But it's going to follow the parameters as Susan outlined. We are not in the same situation as they are in Southern Alberta.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much. Just a few last questions, then I'll have a motion to put on the floor. With the advanced metering infrastructure, is that happening in for multi-unit residential and also commercial properties as well?
Yes, it is.
Great. And then I'm thinking in condo buildings or other commercial buildings where units are individually metered, some of the leaks or pipe breaks might be happening before the unit, if you know what I mean. Will there also be smart metering as the water enters the building generally that can be captured?
Councillor Stephen, that is a very good question. It's currently would not be our approach. In there, I know certainly TELUS offers building systems for condo buildings to consider in that space, but the majority of certainly the high-rise condos right now, a lot of them, the metering is actually to the building, just due to the vertical risers. So it'd be more the distributed multifamily, where it's similar to a townhouse complex where you'd have the individual water meters, or on the low rise. But for the majority of the high rises where those type of leaks are most dramatic, it tends to be more of a single meter into the building.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, well, great to know that's happening. I think this information will, help dramatically. But knowing what a big risk flooding can be in condo buildings, myself and mine included, good to know that the majority of buildings will have that coverage. Switching to the One Water approach, it speaks to a capital plan being developed on the different growth scenarios. Again, just wondering if that's been incorporated into the substantial completion discussion that's underway.
Yes, we are absolutely aligned with the substantial completion discussion. We've been looking at, in particular in South Edmonton, there's a number of questions related to the annexation areas, which we call our Rabbit Hill Basin from a sanitary perspective. One of the things to think of for the Edmonton system in particular, because we wholesale 27% of our water to the region, we have fairly strong infrastructure along certain corridors that head out in the region. And so the bulk of the conversation with us in the community is in those corridors, does it have to be as a bright line of a go, no-go, or is there some ability to leverage that existing infrastructure, which if we loop it, provides us more reliability. But we are absolutely engaged in the discussions on substantial completion.
Great, very interesting to think about those different system components. My last question, very briefly, I noted the move towards Indigenous procurement policy, which is really excellent. On page 5, it noted in relation to some of the Indigenous engagement that's happening that a greater sense of how engagement has been perceived by the community was captured. Just wondering how you're using that that information to potentially refine and sort of that continuous improvement in the Indigenous engagement process.
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer that. So we've been involved in a multi-year engagement process with Enoch Cree in particular, and other nations that are in and around the Edmonton region. But particularly with Enoch Cree, because we work with them on their solar farm for the Eel Smith, of course. We've got a continuous dialogue with them around a number of different issues. We consult them and are consulting them and other nations on the flood project. In terms of the cultural sensitivity, we know that the cultural sensitivity of both the Rossdale and the Eel Smith site is very important to the nations. And in particular with ENOC, we've got a number of different discussions going on. Indigenous procurement is a key initiative for EPCOR, not just in water, but across EPCOR in 2024, where we hope to basically do more business with Indigenous-owned and Indigenous-affiliated companies. And so that discussion is progressing well. We're looking for any and all opportunities. We think that many of the nations that we're dealing with can bring, again, particularly ENOC, some companies that are of interest to us to do the type of work that we need done. So it's a very active area and a very important area for us. So.
You're on mute, Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. It's Monday. Thank you very much. That's really encouraging to hear, and really appreciate the ongoing focus on that work. Mr. Chair, if you're okay, I'll just put a motion on the floor.
Sure.
So this would be, instead of receipt for information, just that administration provide a report outlining the efforts being undertaken by Edmonton and Fire Rescue Services to streamline fire flow and hydrant requirements in infill development.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Go ahead and introduce the motion.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So, really pleased to read in this report about the exceptional work that's been done to modernize our standards. It may seem very boring and very dry, no pun intended, but the size of our pipes has a significant impact on the cost of development, which has the downstream impacts of housing affordability and long-term rate filings as well. So really pleased to see that work happening on the EPCOR side. I know that what I heard today, or what I learned today, is just on the city side, we retain control over requirements for fire flow and fire hydrant spacing. And these are infrastructure pieces that can often stymie, delay, or add significant costs to infill projects. So I know that there's been some great work underway in terms of sort of a case-by-case review of different projects. That's really welcome, and it's again been the result of some great efforts. But it's not standardized, and it can add a lot of uncertainty and additional time to infill projects. So the intent of this motion is just to have administration share the work that they've undertaken, hopefully to get a roadmap in terms of the work to come and the additional work to streamline those requirements further. But just, a relevant and important touch point, I think, given the great work that's happening on the EPCOR side as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Tang.
Yeah, thank you for the motion. So if I understand, this is more for our city administration to do, correct?
Correct. So Edmonton Fire Rescue Service and our delegation could reply more thoroughly, but I believe that they retain responsibility for setting the fire flow, like water flow requirements for hydrants, and also the spacing.
I guess I'm just curious if then this report submitted through EPCOR is not approved for receive for information. And then this motion is more for our city administration to do. I guess I'm just wondering, from a governance structure perspective, does EPCOR have everything they need from us today to move forward on the operational plan? Maybe a question for clerks.
The way the motion is written now is assuming that the report itself would be received for information and no further changes would be required and no other directions given. EPCOR could comment on if they require other direction, but otherwise they'd have the information in the report.
Okay.
Yeah, we do not require additional information. We continue to work with Fire Rescue Services. We will brief them on this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I think Councillor Tang has done. My only question is, we're doing this work anyway. You're doing this work already with EFRS. Do you need a motion to create a report, or were you reporting back in concert with EFRS?
I'd have to work with EFRS. They do have an initiative underway that's tied to some of the housing accelerator work already underway, and so we're supporting them in that.
So I'm just a little concerned about redundancy and creating more reports that overlap. So I guess again, my question is, would we receive this information? Would the work that you're doing with the FRS be reported on anyway, or do you need this motion to create a report to tell us what's going on?
Because this would be predominantly on the city side from this point forward, I do not expect that we would report back onto it in our standard reporting.
Okay, okay, thank you. That's my only question. Any further questions for administration? Not seeing any. Speaking to the motion? Just going to halt for any technological gaps. Not seeing any. So Councillor Stevenson to close.
Thank you so much. Nothing further to add.
Great, thank you. Please vote.
We're just waiting on one vote.
Sorry, it wasn't coming up. Yes for me.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried. Excellent. Thank you very much then for the report and for the conversation. This takes us then to item 7.3, EPCOR Wastewater Integrated Resource Plan. I'm presuming there might be a bit of a switch out of...
We're just going to switch out some people into the speakers. So Craig Bonneville, who I have to call up. So Craig Bonneville, our Director of Engineering and Technical Services, will be joining me. I'll be doing primary presentation and Craig's to assist with response to questions. So I'll just dive into it. So we're here today to present an update on the development of our wastewater integrated resource plan. In previous years at Council, we have presented water integrated resource plan, our gold bar integrated resource plan, and our storm water integrated resource plan. So this plan completes the cycle of bringing the sanitary systems into the IRP approach that we've done in Edmonton since the early 1990s. Next slide, please. So in terms of our overall wastewater plan, integrated plan, we really have these three strategic objectives. One is to support our future growth and redevelopment of the city as it grows to 2 million people, understanding the different patterns that city plan is driving in terms of where we want growth to occur. We want to build a financially and environmentally sustainable wastewater system, understanding that upgrades do cost money. They flow through either through the developers or through the rates. And so understanding ways that we can minimize and make the most efficient use of our existing infrastructure. And then also provide resilient wastewater services. The sanitary network in particular of all the utilities in Edmonton has a lot of single points of failure. In it just due to its treed nature of it. And so us understanding that there are critical crossings of major freeways and other aspects of that. And if there was to be a failure, do we maintain wastewater services in the community? Next slide, please. So as we worked forward in developing the wastewater IRP, these four principles ended up really driving our direction forward in terms of a shift in thinking of how we approach planning for the sanitary system. And so historically, we had a lot of plans that had very large trunks that surrounded the periphery of the city, bringing in greenfield development and assumed that the inner core of the city was status quo. And so us having to shift with the city plan and the increased density on infill development, looking at ways to manage that flow of sewage coming from growth in different parts of the city than had been historically planned. We also recognize that building large underground storage and capacity assets is a very expensive way to solve our problems versus if we can do stuff more at the local level, reduce peak flows, redivert flows, basically manage stuff at the surface level, it's much more efficient for us. In terms of regional focus planning, in the past it's been primarily just balance everything. So equal flows coming in from Leduc and Beaumont and equal flows going out of North Edmonton. We have opportunity here to be much more efficient with our infrastructure choices and looking at the capacities of both plants and ways to shift flows incrementally between those two plants without requiring significant trunk investment. And then finally, looking at very project-specific sustainability solutions around green infrastructure to reduce the peaks. So if we go to the next slide. the big shift for us is us moving to the sanitary planning area concept. So very similar to the city's district planning approach, where we manage and look at individual areas. These areas represent the sewer catchment area, so they don't match any polygons that apply to neighborhoods or district plans for us, but they do represent how the piping network is working at the trunk level. The schematic also shows the very deep trunk network versus the local pipes. Our trunk network is basically built at river elevation, which puts it at extreme depths throughout the city, but it also gives us lots of opportunity if we want to change the direction that a sanitary planning area is flowing, because we have a lot of elevation to redirect those pipes to a different location. Next slide. This is a new map that you'll now start to see a lot more frequently from us, and showing basically where the flows go to throughout the city and the region. And so the areas in red are the wastewater flows that currently go to the Arrow facility managed in the region. We have the blue area, which is going to Gold Bar, which is in north of the river, and then the green area represents the areas going to Gold Bar from the south side. So our main approach as we move forward to this new form of planning is we see growth happening in the infill. So for example, let's say White Avenue node and corridor was to completely take off and have a large increase in flows, we would look to basically shift more of the blue area over to the red area with incremental investments in capital, which are much lower cost. And so we've identified basically 25 megaliters of sewage that could shift with relatively low cost that we will do on a timely basis as that growth starts to manifest in the green areas of the city, or in the blue areas as well. Next slide. The other aspect that's really important for our strategy is the reduction of inflow and infiltration. And so historical plans tended to treat that as a given. It was a number that you couldn't influence, you just had to assume it was coming into your system. Also, green infrastructure, which is a key part of our stormwater strategy, helps to reduce peak flows. And so the figure with the two circles is two cross sections of a pipe, showing for a sanitary pipe and a combined pipe how much allowance is actually put in for wet weather flow, so that errant volume that shouldn't be in that pipe getting in there. And so in some cases it could be up to 75% of that pipe capacity is assumed for that wet weather getting in there, or 50%. And then also you can see how that impact is if it comes in very fast, it eats up pipe capacity, versus if we can slow it down, we gain back capacity. And so because we've been designing our trunk networks and our local sewer networks, assuming that we can't influence this behavior, we have a lot of capacity in our pipes to support the growth plans for the city. And it's only in a few locations where we have some capacity constraints we need to deal with. The next slide, please. So similarly on the dry weather flow, which is that bottom component, the dark blue in the pipes, our water conservation has also been reducing the volumes of water that we need, or sanitary sewage we need to contain in our pipes. The majority of the city was designed when a design standard for dry weather was 350 liters per person per day, and we now know that a new home comes in at around 160 liters per person per day, and so there's a lot of capacity being generated by us managing the dry weather and taking that capacity back. Next slide. This is just a very simple risk grid, just showing how we are approaching going forward for our capital assets that are deteriorating with time and aging. And so we've grouped basically all of our assets are going through a very similar risk analysis using a common framework, and we're basically plotting them on this grid. And then depending on where they land, you'll either see projects for complete rehab, or for maintenance, or for monitoring, depending on the risk level and the requirement for that asset. Historically, when we had disparate utilities working on this, we had similar risk grids, but they weren't necessarily aligned with similar criteria as to what was a critical aspect. And so we're systematically working our way through to make sure we have a consistent lens. This will become more important as we go into our consolidated rate filing for 2028 when we bring the entire utility together. And this initiative is being led by Craig in many places. The next slide, please. Our next is just a very quick schematic of our inventory showing again the deep sewers versus the shallow sewers. And so our deepest is the 45 meters deep, which is in the Windermere area of the city. To put it into perspective, to build a manhole to get down to 20 meters is $1 million versus $50,000 to build a manhole to get down to the local sewer network. The cost of installing a local sewer trunk is around $6,000 a linear meter versus $15,000 to $20,000 a linear meter. So the more that we can do up at the shallow elevation is a much more sustainable and affordable approach for the wastewater system going forward. The deep trunks certainly help us with flexibility, but they shouldn't be our first choice to build something. Next slide, please. And that is actually an aerial shot of going down a 20-meter manhole on an aerial flat is what that photo is. But we also continue to manage our core program, so it's our odor and corrosion and odor reduction. And so since 2018, you can see the reduction that has been occurring. We have to work it from the outside in as we clean the trunks and get access into them. And we have a much better understanding of what drives the odors, and we are continuing to do the programs to replace and address those issues. Next slide, please. So in addition to balancing the flows coming into the wastewater plants between Arrow and Gold Bar, we also have a shared operation for our Clover Bar solids management facility where both plants send their solids to Clover Bar for management. And so we have opportunity again to balance our operations. The nutrients after they've been managed at Clover Bar return back to the treatment plants, and the nutrients are the critical driver for treatment plants going forward. Next slide, please. And so for Gold Bar, this is again just a very simple set of graphics. When we think of our wastewater treatment plant, we have to think of it through 3 dimensions. One is liquid flows coming to the plant, second is solids flows, and the third is the nutrients. And so on liquid flows, we have lots of capacity at the treatment plants, both Arrow and Gold Bar, to manage. From the solids, you see it going up and down because that's the digesters. They age over time, and then you have to take it out of service and recondition it and bring it back in. But generally, we have a healthy gap. It's our nutrients that are our primary concern, and we do have some different treatment processes that we are implementing there to densify the process there. 20% of the nutrients also come back to the plants from Clover Bar, so investing in treatment at Clover Bar to deal with the nutrients also helps gain back capacity there. And so that is our critical design scenario for the plants going forward, not growth. Next slide. So again, on the Clover Bar Solids Management Facility, it's a bit of a rebrand. I think in the past it would have been called the Clover Bar Lagoons, but really we think this is an actual treatment facility where we're processing the sludge, we're able to apply it to agriculture. We've got the Austera system that's recovering phosphorus. And so continuing to actually manage this facility as a way that we can improve and recover wastewater as a contributor to the economy as opposed to a straight drain. But we do have some mechanical engineering and other stuff that needs to be updated on some of the facilities. It was built in the 1970s, and some of the equipment is up for renewal. So you'll see that in our filing. Next slide. So in terms of aligning our interests and values, so we continue with our public engagement approaches for all of our projects in the distributed system as well as at the treatment plants. We do meet all of our requirements, and we make sure that we've got a shared outcome as we're moving forward with our different initiatives. And so next slide, please. And so finally, in closing, we're really excited to have all of our components following an integrated resource planning approach now. It has proven over the years for the water side and for stormwater, it's much more flexible, it's adaptable, it's lower cost. It does require us to step a bit out of our engineering comfort zone and have more operational programs to execute on it, but I think it is a much more reasonable approach for us and our citizens. And so in our PBR filing, you'll see business cases for initiatives that align with this approach to wastewater planning. And at that, I'll open it up for questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Really interesting stuff. Mr. Beckett, any comments?
No comments, thanks.
Great, thank you then. So we'll move to questions from council. I'll start with Councillor Jans, who exempted this item.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was interested in really interested in the economics of the more pipe per person, and was wondering about how, if you could elaborate a little bit of that, specifically around some of our infill goals. You know, we talk a lot about efficiency and yeah, I was really curious thinking about the trunk lines and the other pieces there, and wanted to hear a little bit more about the considerations there.
Are you able to clarify a more specific example of what you're thinking of? That will
So-
help me.
Sure. So for example, you were talking about the cost per manhole, for instance, or the cost for the like the deep trunk or the other pieces, and you know, thinking about in a neighborhood whose population has dropped in half since 1970, maybe when it was built, just how we sort of quantify cost per asset per individual, or some of these other considerations that we may want to be considering.
So I think with every rate filing, we do what's called a cost of service, a study where we look at the cost of the components that we need to file, and then that gets distributed across the ratepayers. So for the stuff that is utility basis, it's about us balancing our cost and investments, and then that gets distributed to the ratepayers based on their customer class. The more that we can reduce trunk work, that reduces capital, which then flows through to a rate increase. From a development perspective as well, we are working with the city as well and looking at the developer fees tied to adding new infill sites and really looking at how this shift in planning changes the approach to that.
So there's not a jurisdiction that sort of looks at, for lack of a better term, like a density modifier for neighborhoods based on efficiency of usage?
That it would not be typical in a utility rate model approach.
Okay, so what about sort of a subdivision of a zone of, like, you're in this zone, this is the requirement of the infrastructure for this zone, as opposed to that zone, which is a different usage, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does. And so that is one of the reasons we've transitioned to the 23 sanitary planning areas. We are going to see a different mix of vintage of homes, types of customers. The city plan is their nodes and corridors in there. And so for each of those sanitary planning areas, there will be a different trajectory of growth and also asset condition. And so we'll have much more fine-tuned analysis and recommendations of projects based on the need of that community.
But would there be a price modifier in the 23?
No.
So it's still going to be universal, even if your zone is a much higher efficiency per user than another one with a much less efficiency per user?
Yeah, so our principle remains on the regulatory side of a posted stamp rate. So there's going to be a single wastewater formula, framework, if you will, for the entire city, regardless of where you are and what the cost of service might be to service your specific either home or business. What Susan was talking about with the cost of service model is based on asset classes, so residential as a class, commercial as a class, if that makes any sense. So
yes.
So it's not like there's a difference in, you know, you're living in this house in this neighborhood and you get a different fee for wastewater treatment than you were if you were in a different house over here in this neighborhood. Does that help?
It does. Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating, and thank you for the presentation. And I'll follow up with questions offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was an excellent report and very exciting to read through. I really enjoyed it. So maybe a few questions. In the realm of savings or cost avoidance with the new approach, I noticed in the report it mentioned 300 million in capital projects that, and if I'm understanding correctly, could potentially be avoided with the new, more agile, adaptive approach. Is that the correct understanding?
Yes, that is correct. You know, so even just as an example, we tested this with the SW 5, 6, and 7 report, which came to council about a year ago, and that eliminated 100 million of trunk line just for looking at an alternative approach. So as we work our way systematically across the city, we expect to see similar types of reductions. Where we will see some increases is we do have 55 crossings in the sanitary system that we have no ability to bypass right now. And so those trunks we do need to address. And so we'll be balancing our ask for capital, considering everything else, and our risk approach as to moving forward on addressing those bypasses.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I guess even with the bypasses, overall, much more cost-effective approach is what I'm understanding.
That is correct. It's a shorter distance. So for example, crossing Anthony Henday is one where we have a single pipe, and a similar crossing White Mud. Those two, building a parallel conduit or parallel pipe just in that location improves our reliability for hundreds of thousands of customers.
Excellent. That is so great to hear. Yeah, just a question about the sanitary planning areas. Really great to see that. I think that is such clear alignment to city plan. It's fantastic. So what does that mean for some of the larger trunk lines that have been advancing through the planning process so far? Like, and I'll use SESS to Gold Bar as an example. Can you help me understand what that looks like now?
Yeah, and so it basically potentially retires the SES system entirely. As we go forward. So the SES concept was to move basically the Rabbit Hill area and the Windermere area and the Riverview area all the way from southwest Edmonton around the outside of the city all the way to the northeast corner through a very large pipe. With this new approach, what we can look at is, do we shift more of Castle Downs and the Montrose area, those areas, do we shift them over to Arrow instead with a much shorter segment of pipe? Hits the same objective of not increasing the flows at the Gold Bar plant, which was the original concept of building the big outer ring. We are working with the city on an SSSF transformation project with the consultants, and there will be a report probably closer to the end of this year based on that work, and we'll have recommendations on there. The NEST system in the SSSF is still seen as a valid pipe and will continue. So there are components that will stay and some that will most likely drop off entirely.
Okay, fantastic. And sorry, you said the SSSF report would come at the end of this year?
Yeah, so city administration is leading that initiative, and we're participating, and I think it's scheduled for December timeframe is the latest timeline I've heard.
Okay, excellent. Then also just wanted to ask about influencing behavior for inflow and infiltration. How much work has been done on the private property side of things so far, or is it mostly been on public?
It's been 100% on the public side. We have not started the private side piece. We are planning to come to Utility Committee in March with our program that we're proposing for that, an expansion of our subsidy program. Right now our subsidy program only deals with backwater valves. We're going to expand it to include the components that would help support this. We've also heard from the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. They are looking for a pilot city in Canada to implement these programs and are selecting with us, and their timeline works for a 2025 to 2028 period, which aligns with our PBR, but they want to bring additional private capital as well as an additional insurance capital to the forebear and basically be able to partner up with our subsidy to further accelerate it. And so we'll be bringing that to you in March.
Amazing. That is so great to hear. I have one more question, but it might take more than 20 seconds, so I'll come back. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rutherford?
Yes, thank you so much. I just had a few questions, and similar to my colleagues, great information, but a few things that were fuzzy to me in the report where I've been getting some concerns from residents in and around sort of the Kensington, Lauderdale area about water main pipes, and a recent response from EPCOR highlighted how those pipes are consistently breaking. And I don't see in this strategy the replacement of these old, continually failing pipes. And I maybe I just missed it, or I'm not understanding where that is. I saw the risk matrix, but it didn't say any specific areas that were identified within that risk matrix as an example.
Yes, so you're asking about water mains, so that would be the water filing.
Yeah.
So that would be it's a separate PBR. And we have a water IRP that manages that.
Okay.
So that's why it's not in the report, but we definitely do have our capital programs that manage main breaks based on break history, and we will be coming forward with a 1-year extension on the water PBR, and then moving into 2028 is when we'll have the consolidated filing where all of this risk will be brought into one view.
So, Councillor, if I could just add, Councillor Rutherford, if you've got some specific concerns around some water main breaks and how they're handled, etc., please reach out to us. We can definitely get you the answers. What Susan is saying is this is a wastewater IRP, so that's what we're talking about, the wastewater side.
Yeah.
We are in a PBR for water where we got approved funding for water main renewals, etc., up until 2026, and we'll be looking at a 1-year extension of that. But that certainly operationally, we're dealing with this all the time. So if you got some specific concerns, please reach out. We'll work with you on this.
Okay, we did. That's how I have the response from EPCOR, but I will absolutely continue to follow up.
Okay.
Within the report, it again, I still look to that one map with the odors and see that one of the highest odor emitting places, or that still has some of that red, yellow, a bigger proportion is within the ward. And again, I'm not getting the clarity on when that is going to be addressed for this specific area. And again, if I'm asking, this is an image in the report, so if I'm asking at the wrong point, please let me know that too.
Sorry, turn my button on. Yeah, so you're talking about the big blob that's right by Yellowhead Trail there, I suspect, is the one that's still intense. In that one, we have identified what the issue is. We have a trunk line that is crossing the CN rail line at that point in Yellowhead that is partially collapsed. And it's a very difficult repair to get in there and do that. And so we've been looking at that, but we have since identified this is actually an example of a spa area for approximately $10 million. We can reconfigure the sewage that is going to that location into the nest system, send it to Arrow, rather than spending probably close to $20 million trying to repair that trunk. And so it is a bit of, we're working through the process with Arrow, because it shifts about 4 million liters of sewage a day over to them, and so they need to have their treatment plant upgrades completed, which will be in a year. And then we'll be able to shift the flows there. But it's a really good example of how taking a one water planning approach allowed us to identify an alternative approach versus just going in and doing a very complex repair under the CN rail line.
That's a really great example. I'm glad I asked that question.
It's also why it takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. As do many things. And then with the dry pond, I know we did receive funding, and there's some projects that are currently in final design phase. How much more aggressive are we being with future dry pond, and does this speak to that?
It certainly does. We are also looking at really improving the amount of slowing, not just in dry ponds, but also in green infrastructure distributed throughout the community. The first 3 years of our SERP strategy, which was the last PBR, we primarily focused on work we were doing in the public realm, so the dry ponds, LID along public right-of-ways. That was to sort through the design standards and the construction limitations. Now that we're through that, we're going to open it up, and there's a lot more land that's privately held that can help to store water, and so it's a continuation of the strategy, and we'll move forward with it.
Great, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Councillor Tang.
Great, thank you for this other report. You mentioned the sanitary planning areas are similar to district planning, but I'm wondering if this is also aligned with the city's growth management framework and the timeline outlined in the substantial completion policy.
100% it is. And so for each of the sanitary planning areas, the polygons just don't line up just due to physical configuration. But when we overlay on top of it, we basically have an opportunity to pull in what are all the growth plans for each sanitary planning area, comparing that against the asset risk, the bypass requirements, where we want to do inflow infiltration reduction. It pulls it all into one document, as opposed to previously, you would have to basically navigate you through 4 or 5 different reports to see what is the approach here.
Okay, well, good. Glad to hear that. And I think just in the past, I have heard feedbacks around some of the sewer systems do not have enough flow through, which cause problems. And I think this was brought up with a previous report. And I guess I'm just wondering if I think the goal, right, is for future development to resolve this.
That is correct. The sewers are sized for a significant amount of wet weather flow getting into them, and so it's really us just changing our focus of, instead just keep building bigger and bigger pipes, let's go chase those small flows, redirect them, slow them down, and buy back capacity. It's very, very similar to when we started our first water IRP in the 1990s, and we started our journey on water conservation. Initially at that point we thought, well, can we buy back the capacity for growth? And we did that. And so I'm very confident we can do the same on the tail end of the water cycle.
Oh, good. Yeah, very, very interesting stuff here. And I just wondering about a question about the low impact developments. So for all the ones on public property, like supporting water retention features in parks and civic squares and that kind of stuff, that's like, is this work only EPCOR or how? And I mean, I'm assuming a lot of this is also city infrastructure and parks and roads.
It is both of us together. And so we've been coordinating with Building Great Neighborhoods, Imagine Jasper, the LRT project. And so EPCOR provides funding towards the city initiatives to add this infrastructure in that meets the criteria. There are also other projects that have been installed without requiring EPCOR funding, but we help coordinate from a design standard perspective and really trying to simplify the standards and reduce the cost for implementing this type of infrastructure.
Excellent. And that just, as part of that LID line of question, any green infrastructure that you're kind of building exclusively?
There are a few projects, primarily when we've got them in partnership with the dry pond. And so they can be incorporated with the dry pond to provide the water quality. And then we've done a few locations on our actual facilities that we operate.
And do you set any goals or targets for that kind of, yeah?
So in the current PBR, it's our green hectares performance measure that we report on in our progress reporting that comes mid-year.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the report. And as always, I'm learning lots.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, just, sorry, 2 quick questions here. I know a substantial completion was just mentioned. Happy to hear that's being considered and integrated into the process. Just making sure that priority growth areas are also part of that conversation, just when it comes to, strategic investments and driving where those dollars may go. Is that an overlay as well?
100%.
Great. Perfect. And final question, just around upgrades to the nutrient treatment capacity at Gold Bar within the existing footprint. Are there any potential odor concerns arising from the nutrient treatment upgrades in particular, just given, I assume, the associated increase in volume?
I'm very happy to pass this question to Craig.
Thank you.
I think the short answer, Councillor Salvador, is no. The upgrades required are on, if you will, the secondary side, or those open vessels that you saw on the east side of the facility, and they're effectively in situ, so they're within that tankage. most of the nuisance orders that we see from Gold Bar are created more on the front end of the facility. That said, we do have investments both in this PBR and planned for our upcoming filing to continue to mitigate those through various capture and treatment options.
Great, that's really good to hear, and it was really cool to see the comparison. I think it was 2018 and 2021. Yeah, sorry, was it 2021? Maybe 2022, but
To 2022,
2022, yeah, to see just the reduction in odor overall. So excellent. And then maybe to the chair, happy to move the recommendation if now is an appropriate time.
Please, yeah.
Sure. So I'll move that the January 22nd, 2024 EPCOR Water Services Incorporated Report, EXT 02260, be received for information.
Great, thank you. Presuming no introductory comments, anyone to speak to the motion? Not seeing anyone. I'll just really quickly say the combination of reports that we have received and that we continue to receive, where we are streamlining our standards, where we're becoming ever more efficient with the systems and the interaction of the systems, where we're being really practical and pragmatic about making sure we're only spending money on the things we need to spend money on and leveraging what we already have. That's really exciting for me. I don't have a lot of questions because I already really love this stuff. I consume it, and my mind is already in it. But I really appreciate the collection of reports, not just today, but over time, and looking forward to bringing all of that together as we go forward. So thank you very much. Councillor Stevenson?
Well, you captured my thoughts exactly. I was pretty silent on this one, but just wanted to say how excited I am for this work. I think the responsive approach is so exciting, and it's going to deliver huge value and benefit for our community. So thank you all so much for this transformative work. Really appreciate and support what you're doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, not much to add other than I share that excitement, and I think that this type of shift is exactly what we need when we're looking to fully implement city plan. And as we move forward, I can see that there will be cost savings. That this is an adaptable, flexible, agile approach that will allow us to really be responsive to the way we're growing as a city. So thank you so much, and looking forward to following this as it moves forward.
Great, thank you. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried. Are there any notices of motion or motions without customary notice today? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Well done.